Over the years, Stephen King has published a massive amount of novels and short stories that have eventually been adapted for the screen. Of his 65 novels, a whopping 45 have been adapted to film or TV, but there surely can't be that many stories left to explore. The truth is, though, there's quite a few great King tales rife with cinematic potential that have never made the leap to Hollywood. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture here with 10 Stephen King stories that haven't been adapted yet, but should. Number 10. Afterlife. Stephen King has always had an occupation with mortality, but rarely with such overt musings as his short story Afterlife, which follows a deceased investment banker who lands in purgatory and must face what comes next. If you could start your life over again and knew you could never do anything differently, would you? Or would you let yourself vanish from existence? Well, that's the question that haunts William Andrews, who recalls the worst chapters of his life and ponders suffering through them again. Philosophical and ambiguous, Afterlife finds King at his most gloomy and atmospheric, forcing Andrews and the mysterious stranger responsible for his time in purgatory to connect, question their lives, and seek some kind of solace in their decisions. Granted, none of this would make for a particularly flashy film, but given the depth of its characters as well as its haunting farewell and dense themes of faith and awakening, you can see two great actors squaring off to bring Afterlife alive on screen, forcing audiences to question everything about themselves. Number 9. Later. This 2022 novel is one of the most quintessentially Stephen King stories he's written in recent years. Following a young boy who can speak to the recent dead and must use this secret skill to thwart a terrorist attack and the violent actions of his mother's plotting ex-girlfriend. Short but bracing, moving, and surprisingly humorous, Later is a dark, fantastical coming-of-age story that fits very much into classic King territory, dealing with a child imbued with a higher purpose when all they want to do is live a normal life, and its various plot twists only make it that much more compelling. A delicate tale of family, coming of age, and motherhood, as well as a breakneck thriller, Later's cinematic potential is gigantic. Its visceral imagery and powerful character development are sight to behold right until its haunting final chapter, which will break your heart but leave you hopeful. Give this thing to the right director and young actor raring to go, and you've surely got yourself a winner full of darkness but sprinkled with hope. Number 8. Everything's Eventual. That's a word I struggle to say. Hey, we've learned something today. Stephen King sure loves to tell stories about telekinesis and powers of the mind, but when they're as compelling as Carrie, Firestarter, and this riveting novella, Everything's Eventual, who can blame him? The titular tale is one of his finest short story collections. Everything's Eventual concerns teenager Dinky Earnshaw, who has the ability to influence people's actions simply by drawing mysterious pictures. Hired by an enigmatic stranger to act as his unseen assassin, Dinky lives a life of luxury until his conscience catches up to him. Darkly amusing, deeply unsettling, and violent, Everything's Eventual is a somber tale of murder and power, both literal and political, that grips at every turn, even when its drama slips into outright horror and despair, and Dinky loses his grip on reality and himself. Constantly surprising and bursting with complex characters, not just a morally compromised Dinky, but also his secretive employer, Mr. Sharpton, this is one story that would make for one hell of a movie indeed, genre-bending and thrilling to the very end. Number 7. Roadwork. Back in 2019, IT director Andy Muschietti announced that he was planning to adapt another King novel with Roadwork, originally published under the author's pseudonym Richard Bachman, though it seems the project has fallen through. After 5 years without an update, it appears we'll have to wait a while to see Roadwork on the big screen, and that really is a shame. The story of a mourning father who plots to stop his house and business being demolished to make way for a new highway, it's one of King's finest unsung gems. A socially conscious satire and thriller about man's relationship with big businesses, as well as a very dark comedy with a brilliantly compelling protagonist driven to madness. Think Falling Down, but it's set in a house Michael Douglas refuses to leave. Roadwork screams big screen potential through and through. This isn't the best of King's creative Bachman era, we'll get to that one in a moment, but it's still a galvanizing piece of work deserving of more exposure, proving the author can write about horror just as well when he's writing about the everyday. Number 6. From a Buick 8. Another underappreciated jewel in King's sprawling bibliography, From a Buick 8 proclaims to tell the story of a car that acts as a conduit to another world, but its main focus is on the aging men and women around it, their relationships and lives. A thematically dense piece of work told from several perspectives across decades worth of memories, this 2002 novel is King at his most typical. Spooky and fantastical with cliffhangers and ambiguity galore, but also his most sensitive and character-driven. In a way, almost wistful in its assessment of memory and age and mourning and found family, From a Buick 8 still has plenty of scares, but its true power lies with its characters, who remain some of the author's most vividly drawn and memorably moving. Like The Green Mile and Shawshank, this is one movie in waiting not without its twisting flights of fantasy, but it works best as a touching character study that sneaks up on you with its feeling. Number 5. Strawberry Spring. King, of course, has written many disturbing tales over the years, but few as consistently bleak as his short story Strawberry Spring, recently made into an Audible series but left bafflingly untouched by the big screen. Told from the perspective of a melancholy former college student whose memories of murder are stirred by the return of an elusive local serial killer, Strawberry Spring builds to a conclusion that feels inevitable, but King's slow burn reveal and love for creepy ambiguity still makes its conclusions deeply unsettling. Published in 1968, the story is one of King's earliest works, but it's lost none of its bite and never reads as amateurish. Its slight but profound narration capturing a world of feeling and forgotten memories difficult to shake. You can totally see Strawberry Spring as a movie. A lonely man recounts the tale of a murderer lost to his thoughts and evading the truth. And this classic King tale is as tragic as it is horrifying, packing a mean punch. Number 4. Summer Thunder. Over the years, King has dealt with the apocalypse in a variety of ways, from the epic, such as The Stand and Cell, to the more understated, such as Sleeping Beauties, but never with such visceral intimacy as his short story Summer Thunder, the closing chapter of his collection The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. Set during a mysterious nuclear war, the story follows its mourning narrator Robinson as he befriends his elderly neighbour, adopts a stray dog, and waits for the inevitable radiation poisoning in the air to take its hold and kill him. Bleak but thoughtful, Summer Thunder certainly won't make for a cheery comedy, but its meditative musings on death and companionship do give the whole sorry state of things a hopeful lilt, as Robinson finds peace in his final days and learns to live with the grief of losing his family. A tender, heartbreaking, oddly beautiful tale, Summer Thunder is King at his most atmospheric and vividly imaginative, its images bursting off the page with unforgettable intensity. Number 3. The Long Walk. The very best of King's Bachman books, The Long Walk boasts a simple premise brilliantly executed. In a dystopic future, 100 teenage boys are forced to participate in The Long Walk, an epic marathon that ends with only one walker left alive. Viscerally grueling and intense, The Long Walk is first and foremost a high-concept thriller in which a group of boys, each with something to fight for, all with something to prove, befriend and betray each other for victory. But it's also a thematically rich exploration of class struggle, fascism, and the futility of the Vietnam War. Unlike the rest of the stories on this list, there is reportedly a Long Walk movie in the works from the Hunger Games director Francis Lawrence, the first positive update on its existence since George A. Romero worked on his own film back in 1988. We'll wait to see if this one happens or fizzles out like Romero's, so as it stands, The Long Walk is one of King's most timely, thrilling, and breathtaking novels, never given the big screen treatment. Madness. Number 2. Joyland. Joyland is another in a long line of late-era King novels that elevates a simple story with a grasp of character and emotion that leaves you reeling, with its horror secondary to the hopeful worldview and humanity the author captures even in the darkest of times. The story of a lovelorn young man who starts working at a small amusement park, befriending a secretive woman and her son, and learning about a local ghost story, Joyland is an economically paced novel about love and heartbreak and companionship, with just a dash of murder for good measure. Devastating and deeply moving, the story pulls the rug from under you repeatedly, crafting a bracing mystery around one man's desire to move on from past hardships and find himself. King has always had a knack for this, emotionally resonant stories with a gripping edge of violence and ghouls, and Joyland is one of his finest recent achievements in that regard. As a movie, it's positively dynamite. Number 1. Revival. The single most breathtakingly bleak and scary novel of Stephen King's work this century, Revival is also one of his most underrated tales, rarely discussed but begging for wider acclaim. Just tread carefully when you seek it out. Following a struggling musician whose shared past with a disgraced minister leads them both down a path to understanding what happens after death, the novel is relentless in its tragedy but profound in its humanity. A thoughtful tale of grief and faith that tackles its lofty themes eloquently. As a whole, Revival isn't easygoing. Few King tales are, really. But it is one of the author's most assured assessments of mortality and human nature, full of poignant characters, disturbing twists, and the most harrowing finale of King's career. Which is saying a lot, but just trust me on this. It's a lot. No, Revival won't win points for being uplifting, but in a world where successfully terrifying horror movies are few and far between, it might just be the tale we need. Stephen King has rarely been better, nor as entertainingly hopeless since the 1980s.